ballroom shimmered like a kingdom of light. Chandeliers dripped crystal fire across velvet drapes, and every camera flash seemed to burn with greed. Tonight was not just any evening. It was the Van Allen billion-dollar auction, where fortunes shifted hands with a single nod, and reputations were forged or destroyed in whispers of millions. Leonard Carrington stood near the center, his arm linked with the dazzling Mistress who had stolen headlines and his marriage alike. He was the kind of billionaire who wore arrogance as casually as his custom tuxedo. To him, this night was about prestige, parading his success, his new lover, and erasing the ghost of the woman he had discarded. The Mistress, Cassandra Vale, gleamed like a jewel he could never afford, but somehow owned. Her gown was slit too high, her laugh pitched too sharp, but the crowd adored her boldness. Cameras clung to her like bees to sugar. She was the symbol of his upgrade, at least in his mind. But even as he smiled, Leonard felt a shadow in the room. He couldn't name it. He only felt a prickle down his spine, as if fate had tapped him on the shoulder. Then it happened. The doors at the far end opened, and silence fell like a blade. A woman stepped in, dressed in elegance so understated it commanded the room. Her gown was black silk, flowing yet simple, her hair swept back with grace. But what drew every gasp was not the gown, not the poise. It was the swell of her stomach, the unmistakable sign of pregnancy beneath the silk. It was Isabella Hale, Leonard's ex-wife. Gasps echoed like broken glass across the ballroom. The cameras turned violently, abandoning Cassandra in a heartbeat. Isabella, once written off as the forgotten wife discarded for a mistress, was suddenly the center of gravity. But the true shock was not her presence, not even her pregnancy. It was the man walking at her side. Tall, reserved, a face the world knew too well. Julian Cross, the billionaire sponsor of the night. The man whose fortune built this very auction. Known for his icy control and ruthless dominance in finance, Julian rarely appeared in public. Yet tonight, he was not only present, he was standing protectively beside Isabella, his hand at the small of her back, as if she belonged there. The crowd erupted in whispers. "That's her? The ex-wife? Pregnant? My God, with whose child? Julian Cross? He never escorts anyone." Leonard froze, his jaw tightened, his grip on Cassandra's hand faltered. Cassandra felt it instantly and hissed through her smile. What is she doing here? But Leonard couldn't answer. His ex-wife, the woman he had humiliated, replaced, and discarded, had returned like a storm dressed in silk, and she was no longer alone. She wasn't here to beg. She wasn't here to cry. She was here to be seen. The auctioneer's voice wavered before regaining composure. "Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our esteemed host, Mr. Julian Cross, accompanied tonight by Miss Isabella Hale." The title cut like a knife. Miss Isabella Hale. Not Mrs. Carrington, not Leonard's ex-wife. She was her own name, her own power, standing beneath the spotlight. Leonard's heart hammered against his ribs. He remembered the last night they had spoken. The papers signed in silence, the accusations, the slammed doors, Isabella leaving with nothing but dignity. He had thought she was gone forever, buried in the past. But now she stood radiant, pregnant, beside the one man Leonard could never outshine. Cassandra's nails dug into his arm. "Say something. They're staring at her more than me." But Leonard could not. His lips were ash, his tongue heavy. Because in that instant, he realized something cruel and undeniable. He hadn't just lost a wife, he had lost the narrative. The cameras flashed harder now, reporters whispering into recorders, the social feeds exploding. Ex-wife returns, pregnant, with Julian Cross. The story wrote itself. Isabella did not glance toward Leonard, not once. She moved with grace, her gaze steady, her hand gently resting on her stomach. Julian leaned closer, murmuring something only she could hear, and she smiled. A smile not of revenge, but of survival. That smile cut deeper than any words. Because it told Leonard, "You cannot erase me. You cannot define me. I am no longer yours to break." Cassandra, desperate, forced a laugh too loud. Well, isn't this dramatic? She looks heavier than before." But the attempt at cruelty landed flat. No one laughed. No one looked. Cassandra was invisible now, swallowed by Isabella's presence. Leonard's empire had been built on control, yet here he stood, powerless, reduced to silence by the sight of a woman he once dismissed. The night was only beginning. The auctioneer prepared to open the first bid, but everyone knew. The real battle was not for art or diamonds. It was for power, for dignity, for the right to rewrite history. and Isabella Hale had just placed her opening bid. The ballroom had not settled since Isabella entered. The first painting, a Monet, sat untouched on its velvet easel, waiting for bids that never came. Everyone's attention remained fixed on the triangle now glowing in the spotlight. Leonard, Cassandra, and Isabella with Julian Cross at her side. The auctioneer cleared his throat, his gavel trembling ever so slightly. "Shall we begin, ladies and gentlemen? The opening bid?" But his words drowned beneath the rising tide of whispers. "She looks radiant, even pregnant. Julian never escorts anyone, and now this? Leonard must be burning alive right now." Phones lit up. Social feeds exploded with hashtags: pregnant ex-wife, Julian and Isabella, frozen mistress. What was meant to be an elite, private affair had already spilled onto the public stage. At the center table, Cassandra Val leaned forward, her smile frozen but her eyes venomous. She tilted her champagne glass just enough for the light to catch, whispering loud enough for surrounding ears. "Well, I suppose some women can't let go of the spotlight, even if they have to waddle in with a baby bump." Gasps and uncomfortable coughs followed. The cruelty was deliberate, a knife aimed to shred Isabella's dignity. Leonard forced a chuckle, but it sounded hollow, desperate. He squeezed Cassandra's hand in warning, but she only tightened her grip, nails digging into his skin. She needed to win back the attention, and humiliation was her weapon of choice. Isabella did not flinch. She did not even glance at Cassandra. Instead, she leaned slightly toward Julian. He murmured something, and she laughed softly, just once. A sound so natural, so unbothered, it drowned Cassandra's petty jab like rain on embers. The room shifted with that laugh. The crowd wasn't laughing at Isabella. They were laughing with her. The mistress's cruelty had missed its mark. Cassandra's smile twitched. For the first time she felt invisible. Leonard adjusted his cufflinks, his pride unraveling thread by thread. He remembered the last time Isabella had laughed like that. In their kitchen, years ago, before the Empire, before Cassandra. Back when her laughter was his world, now it belonged to someone else. He turned sharply, whispering to Cassandra, "Stop. You're making it worse." She snapped back, still smiling through clenched teeth. "She's stealing everything. You think I'll sit here like some accessory?" But Leonard knew the truth. It wasn't Isabella stealing anything. It was Julian giving her what Cassandra never could. Presence, legitimacy, power. The auctioneer slammed the gavel. Opening bid for the Monet, 50 million. A hand rose. Not Leonard's, not Cassandra's. Julian Cross. The crowd gasped. His voice was calm, sharp as ice. 50 million. He didn't even glance at the painting. His eyes rested on Isabella as if the entire bid was nothing more than punctuation in their private conversation. Leonard's jaw locked. 50 million. On the first bid. A number only a man like Julian could throw like pocket change. And he had done it while sitting beside Leonard's ex-wife. Another hand rose timidly across the room, a hedge fund manager sweating under the lights. 52 million. Julian leaned back, his lips barely moving. 100 million. The room erupted. Not even the art was the story anymore. It was the gesture, the audacity, the declaration. Julian Cross was not bidding on a painting. He was bidding on the stage itself. And he had just claimed it in Isabella's name. Cassandra slammed her glass onto the table, the champagne spilling. "He's showing her off, like some prize." Leonard's voice was low, trembling. "Then why does it feel like we're the spectacle?" He looked around. Every eye was on them, on him, waiting for a reaction. He had lived his entire life commanding rooms, yet here he was, reduced to an afterthought in a story he once owned. Julian's bid crushed all opposition. The gavel fell. Sold to Mr. Julian Cross at 100 million. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed, and Isabella simply smiled. She placed her hand gently on her stomach, as though anchoring herself amidst the storm. Cassandra could no longer contain herself. She stood abruptly, the chair screeching. "Congratulations, Isabella. I didn't know pity came with $100 million price tag." The ballroom froze. Gasps sliced the air. Every camera swiveled. Leonard's blood drained from his face. He reached to pull Cassandra down, but it was too late. Isabella finally looked at them. Her eyes did not burn with rage. They carried no venom, no malice. They were calm, steady, unbearably dignified. Her lips parted. "Some men buy diamonds to cover shame. Others buy silence. But tonight, I see a man buying freedom." The words landed like a blade across the table. Not shouted, not cruel, just simple truth. The crowd erupted in murmurs, phones tapped furiously. Cassandra's face burned crimson. Leonard felt as though the ground had been stolen beneath him. And Julian Cross? He simply placed his hand over Isabella's, grounding her. His expression unreadable, yet unshakable. Reporters whispered, "Freedom? What did she mean? Freedom from Leonard? Freedom for herself?" But Leonard knew. She had just declared herself free. From him, from their past, from the cage he built around her. And with Julian Cross at her side, the world was forced to believe her. The ballroom had begun to breathe again, though not with ease. After Julian's $100 million strike, the air felt charged, unstable, like the moment before a storm. The chandeliers above no longer glittered with grace. They trembled, reflecting the tension that hung from every gaze. Cassandra Vale sat rigid beside Leonard, her jaw clenched so tightly it looked carved from glass. She had never been ignored in her life. Not on red carpets, not in the glossy spreads of fashion magazines, and certainly not in a room full of people paid to adore wealth. Yet tonight she was invisible. Every lens, every whisper, every pulse of curiosity bent toward Isabella and the billionaire beside her. Cassandra leaned in, her voice cutting into Leonard's ear. "This ends tonight. She won't humiliate me again." Leonard swallowed hard, eyes still fixed on Isabella across the hall. "Don't," he muttered. "You've already said enough." But Cassandra's lips curled. "You don't control me, Leonard. Not anymore. If she wants to play games in front of the world, then so will I." Meanwhile, Isabella sat poised, her hand resting protectively on the curve of her stomach. Julian spoke little, but his silence was a fortress. Every so often he tilted his head toward her, asking softly if she needed water, if she was comfortable. She answered with faint smiles, never once lowering her guard. Yet beneath her serenity, Isabella could feel it, Cassandra's venom circling closer, like a predator testing the edge of the light. She remembered too well how Cassandra thrived on spectacle. Isabella had once been crushed under that weight, her quiet dignity mistaken for weakness. But not tonight. Tonight she had Julian at her side, and something deeper in her chest. A resolve. Still she braced herself. Cassandra would not go down quietly. The next item was unveiled. A necklace, shimmering with emeralds so vivid they seemed to glow from within. The crowd murmured in awe, but Cassandra's eyes narrowed, a spark of recognition flaring. She leaned back, whispering loudly enough for a circle of guests to hear. "Would you look at that? The Carrington wedding gift. Leonard bought it for his wife years ago." Heads turned. Whispers darted like arrows. Isabella's chest tightened. Yes. She remembered that necklace, how Leonard had draped it over her neck in front of guests, smiling for cameras, only to later remind her it wasn't really hers. Nothing ever was, he'd said. It was all part of his empire, even her. Cassandra wasn't done. She raised her voice, feigning a laugh. "I suppose some jewels never lose their value, even if the woman wearing them does." The words sliced clean through the ballroom. A murmur spread, half shocked, half thrilled by the cruelty. Reporters scribbled furiously, already crafting headlines. "Mistress targets pregnant ex-wife in auction insult." Leonard's face drained of color. He tugged Cassandra's arm. "Enough," he hissed. "You're dragging me down with you." But Cassandra shook him off, her eyes glittering with malice. She wanted blood, and Isabella's was the only kind that mattered. Julian's gaze shifted to Isabella. Calm, steady, waiting. Isabella inhaled, willing her heartbeat to slow. For years, she had let Cassandra's barbs pierce her. For years, she had retreated, swallowed tears in silence. But tonight, she refused to give the mistress that victory. She rose to her feet. The room hushed instantly. Even the auctioneer froze mid-sentence. Cameras zoomed in. Isabella's voice was soft but carried like glass breaking. "That necklace, yes, it was given to me, not as love, not as honor, but as a chain." Cassandra's smirk faltered. Isabella continued, her eyes never leaving Leonard. "It was meant to remind me I belonged to him, that everything, even me, was property. And the day I left that necklace behind because I was never meant to be owned." The room erupted in whispers, shock twisting through the crowd. Cassandra tried to laugh, but it cracked. "Oh, how noble. You walk away and suddenly you're a saint?" Julian rose then, towering, his presence commanding silence without a word. He turned to the auctioneer. 150 million for the necklace." A gasp tore through the room. Julian's eyes remained fixed on Isabella, his voice steady. so it can never be used as a chain again. The gavel struck. Sold to Mr. Julian Cross. Julian stepped forward, accepted the velvet case, and placed it in Isabella's hands. The crowd held its breath. For a moment, Isabella stared at the necklace, the weight of years, of pain, of silent nights pressed into a single glimmering chain. Her fingers trembled. Then she lifted her gaze, fire igniting behind her eyes. With a single, deliberate motion, she hurled the necklace to the floor. The emeralds shattered across the marble like falling stars. The room gasped, then roared with applause. Cameras flashed so violently it felt like daylight. Cassandra's scream cut above the noise. "You ungrateful witch, do you know what you've just thrown away?" Isabella turned to her, calm, unshaken. "Yes, a prison." And she walked back to her seat, Julian steady at her side. Leonard sat frozen, his hands gripping the table so hard his knuckles bled white. He felt his empire unraveling in real time. The mistress he flaunted had just been reduced to a clown, and the ex-wife he discarded had transformed into a storm the world now adored. He leaned close to Cassandra, voice like gravel. "You've destroyed us." But Cassandra's fury drowned him out. She pointed at Isabella, shouting across the room. "This isn't over. You think you've won? You're nothing without him." Every camera caught the outburst. Every headline sharpened its blade. Isabella did not answer. She didn't need to. Because tonight, silence itself had become her sword. By the next morning, the billion-dollar auction was no longer about art. Headlines screamed across every newsfeed. Pregnant ex-wife shatters emerald necklace. Billionaire Julian Cross at her side. Cassandra Vale's meltdown overshadowed by Isabella's calm grace. Who was the father of Isabella Hale's child? The world had a new obsession, and her name was Isabella. Inside her penthouse suite, Isabella sat by the window, the city glittering like shards of glass below. She pressed her palm against her stomach, feeling the quiet flutter that reminded her she was not alone. Julian stood nearby, reading the morning papers. His expression betrayed nothing, but when he lowered the pages, his eyes softened as they met hers. "They're digging, Isabella," he said quietly. "Every outlet wants the truth about you." Isabella nodded. She had expected this. Public sympathy was a double-edged sword. It drew admiration, but it also invited vultures. "What are they saying?" she asked. Julian hesitated. "They've unearthed photographs from years ago." He handed her a tablet. Isabella's breath caught as she scrolled. There she was, 5 years younger, standing outside a charity gala, and just a few feet away, caught in the same frame, Julian Cross. Another photo, Isabella leaving a hospital late at night. In the corner, blurred but unmistakable, Julian's car idling at the curb. And another, Isabella sitting at a cafe, her face pale yet weary. Behind her, Julian at another table, his gaze hidden by a newspaper. The headlines wrote themselves. Julian Cross and Isabella Hale, a secret history? Were they connected before the divorce? Is Julian the father? Isabella closed her eyes, the weight of the past pressing down. She remembered those nights. The gala where Leonard had abandoned her to flirt with investors, the hospital visit after one of his cruel fights, the cafe where she had sat alone, unsure how to go home. She had thought no one noticed. But Julian had been there, always just out of reach, always silent, but watching. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why were you there?" Julian's jaw tightened. He turned toward the window, as though the skyline could shield his truth. "Because I saw you breaking," he said finally. "And I couldn't look away." Across the city, Leonard sat in his office, the blinds drawn tight. Cassandra paced the room like a caged animal, at her heels striking the marble. "They're painting her as a saint," Cassandra spat. "The poor pregnant ex-wife, rescued by the mighty Julian Cross. It's pathetic." Leonard slammed his fist against the desk. "It's dangerous." He shoved a newspaper toward her. The headline screamed, "Carrington Empire faces investor doubts amid Isabella drama." "The board is calling emergency meetings," Leonard growled. "Stock is dipping. They think I've become a liability." Cassandra froze. "Because of her?" "Because of him," Leonard corrected, his eyes dark. "Julian Cross is using her. He's turning her into a weapon against me." Cassandra laughed bitterly. "And the world's eating it up." She sank into a chair, glaring at the headlines. "So what now? Do we sit back while she destroys you?" Leonard's eyes hardened. "No, we fight back. If they want a scandal, we'll give them one." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a hiss. We leak the truth about her pregnancy. We tell them it's not mine. Back at the penthouse, Isabella paced the floor. They'll twist everything, Julian. They'll say the baby is yours, or worse, that I betrayed Leonard before the divorce. Julian's expression remained calm, but his hand clenched into a fist at his side. Let them say what they will. Truth doesn't scare me. Isabella stopped, turning to him, her voice trembling. But it scares me, because no matter how strong I try to be, I'm still the one they'll tear apart. A woman, a mother. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, her composure fractured. She sank onto the couch, covering her face. Julian moved to her side, lowering himself until he was level with her. He didn't touch her, not yet. He simply waited until she lowered her hands, tears streaking her cheeks. You don't have to fight alone anymore, he said softly. I've been silent too long. If the world wants answers, then they'll get mine. That evening, the whispers turned to roars. A leaked article spread across social media, claiming sources close to Leonard Carrington had confirmed Isabella's child was not his. The piece went further. The timing of her pregnancy raises questions. Was Isabella already involved with Julian Cross before her divorce? Leonard's fingerprints were all over it. Reporters flooded the streets outside Isabella's building. Camera crews camped at the entrance. Headlines burned through every screen. Pregnant ex-wife's baby mystery. Carrington or Cross. Billion-dollar love triangle shakes high society. Inside, Isabella stared at the television, her body trembling. They won't stop, she whispered. They'll tear this child apart before it's even born. Julian reached for the remote and shut off the noise. His voice was low, steady, a steel edge beneath velvet. Then we take control of the story. Tomorrow, you walk into the world not as his ex-wife, not as a victim, but as a woman who cannot be silenced. Isabella met his gaze, fear warring with resolve. And if they ask whose child it is, Julian leaned closer, his eyes unflinching. Then I'll tell them the truth, that whether the child carries my name or not, I will protect it as my own. The words hung in the air, heavy, irrevocable. For the first time in years, Isabella felt her fear weaken beneath the weight of someone else's certainty. She placed her hand over her stomach and whispered, almost to herself, "Then tomorrow, let them hear us." The second night of the auction carried a different weight. The press swarmed the entrance, their flashes like lightning against the velvet ropes. Protesters and admirers alike crowded the sidewalks, shouting Isabella's name. Some carried signs of support. Dignity is priceless. Others held tabloids with screaming headlines about her pregnancy and Julian. Inside the ballroom, tension thrummed like a live wire. Leonard and Cassandra arrived first, their smiles brittle, their movements sharp. Leonard knew his empire was cracking. He felt it in the whispers of investors, in the way cameras no longer lingered on him but instead sought any glimpse of Isabella. Cassandra, however, had a plan. A cruel, perfect plan. When Isabella entered with Julian at her side, the crowd parted like water around a ship. She was radiant, even in simplicity. An ivory gown flowing around her frame, her hand resting gently over her unborn child. Julian's presence beside her was thunder without sound. No one dared approach, but everyone watched. Cassandra leaned toward Leonard, her lips curling. Watch closely. Tonight, she won't leave unscathed. The auctioneer began with paintings and sculptures, but Cassandra's eyes gleamed as her turn approached. She had arranged it carefully. A special lot, donated anonymously. Finally, the item was unveiled. The velvet box opened, and the room inhaled sharply. A wedding ring. Not just any ring. The Carrington wedding ring. The one Leonard had slid onto Isabella's finger before cameras and society, the one she had left behind when she walked away. Cassandra's voice rang out, feigned innocence dripping with venom. Oh, how touching. A piece of history, ladies and gentlemen. The ring of a marriage that couldn't last. A relic of broken promises, surely worth something to someone. Laughter rippled uneasily through the crowd. Gasps followed as people turned to see Isabella's face. Her fingers stiffened against her gown. Memories rushed in. That day under chandeliers, Leonard's practiced smile, her trembling hands. She had thought it meant forever. Instead, it had become a shackle, just like the emerald necklace. Julian's hand brushed hers lightly under the table. His voice, low and steady, grounded her. It's only a ring. It holds no power unless you give it. Isabella breathed deeply, steadying herself. She rose before the room, her voice soft but cutting through the silence. That ring, it was once a promise, but promises built on lies cannot hold. I left it behind, not because it lost value, but because I gained mine. A murmur swept through the room. Some nodded, others whispered. Cameras flashed like wildfire. Cassandra smirked. Such poetry. But if you truly valued yourself, Isabella, why not keep it as a reminder? Or is it easier to throw away symbols when you have someone new to buy you better ones? The words dripped like acid. Julian stood then, his presence silencing the murmurs. His gaze swept across the room before settling on the auctioneer. 200 million. The crowd erupted. The bid was obscene, more than the ring's worth 100 times over. But Julian's face was calm, unshaken. Cassandra's smirk faltered. You can't be serious. Julian cut her off, his voice as cold as marble. I'm entirely serious, because this ring does not belong to Leonard Carrington. It never did. It belongs to the woman he tried to bind, and tonight I will ensure no man binds her again. The gavel slammed. Sold. To Mr. Julian Cross. Julian took the velvet box from the stage, turning to Isabella. He opened it before her, not as a proposal, not as a gesture of ownership, but as an offering. The room hushed, waiting. Isabella stared at the ring. The memories, the pain, the betrayal, it all surged back. Her eyes filled, but her tears did not fall from weakness. They gleamed like steel. Slowly, she took the ring. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then, with a steady hand, she turned and placed it back on the velvet cushion. Her voice rang clear. This is not my freedom. This is not my worth. My value has never been measured in gold or diamonds. It lives here. She placed her hand firmly over her stomach. In the life I choose to protect. And no one will ever strip that from me again. The crowd erupted, thunderous applause shaking the chandeliers. Some stood, clapping until their hands reddened. The cameras flashed, immortalizing the moment. Cassandra shot to her feet, furious. She's manipulating you. She's nothing but a... But her words drowned beneath the roar of approval. Even investors and socialites who once bowed to Leonard now applauded Isabella. Leonard sat pale, motionless, his empire crumbling in his silence. Isabella returned to her seat, Julian steady beside her. For once, she didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was winning. Outside, the headlines spun before the ink was even dry. Pregnant ex-wife rejects $200 million ring, declares her worth beyond gold. Cassandra Vale humiliated as Julian Cross buys Carrington wedding ring. Leonard silent as ex-wife commands the auction. The tide had turned and the world had chosen its heroine. The fallout was immediate. By dawn, the world had declared Isabella Hale not just a woman, not just an ex-wife, but a symbol. Pregnant ex-wife rejects ring, redefines freedom. Julian Cross spends millions to protect, not possess. Leonard Carrington silent amid scandal. News anchors dissected her words. Editorials praised her courage. Social media crowned her a modern heroine, a woman who had walked away from diamonds and dared to say her worth was not for sale. But for Leonard Carrington, it was ruin. In the glass tower of Carrington Holdings, the boardroom was colder than stone. Leonard sat at the head, his tie loosened, his eyes shadowed. Around him, the directors whispered with disdain masked as politeness. Your personal life, one began carefully, has become a liability. The press is framing Isabella as a saint, and you, another added, as a villain. Our investors are spooked. Stock has dropped 12% in 3 days. Leonard slammed his hand against the polished table. Do you think I care about tabloids? But the silence that followed was damning. The men and women around him did care. Because money followed reputation, and his reputation was bleeding. One director finally spoke what the others only implied. If this continues, we may have to consider a vote of confidence in your leadership. The words struck like ice. A vote of confidence was nothing less than a knife pressed against his throne. Across the city, Isabella's name soared. She couldn't step outside without cameras flashing, without strangers offering smiles and blessings. Mothers stopped her on the street to say she had given them strength. Women wrote letters about leaving toxic marriages, about reclaiming dignity. Inside her apartment, Isabella sat surrounded by stacks of mail, piles of support she never expected. She touched her stomach, whispering softly to her unborn child. You see this? The world isn't laughing anymore. They're listening. Julian entered, placing a folder on the table. He glanced at the letters but did not linger. His mind was elsewhere. They're still digging, he said. But now it's not just about you, it's about Leonard. Isabella looked up, confused. Leonard? Julian opened the folder. Inside were documents, spreadsheets, numbers highlighted in red. Carrington Holdings, Julian said slowly, has been laundering money. Offshore accounts, hidden transfers. He's been covering it for years, and someone just leaked it. Isabella's breath caught. Leaked? Julian nodded. An anonymous report hit the financial journals this morning. It names Leonard. It suggests you knew. Her eyes widened. Me? Because you were his wife when it began. They'll assume you were either complicit or a witness. The weight of it slammed into her chest. She had left Leonard to save herself, to find freedom, not to be dragged back into his corruption. What do I do? She whispered. Julian's eyes softened, though his voice stayed firm. Tell the truth. The world is already on your side. If you distance yourself now, you could bring him down for good. Isabella closed the folder, her hands trembling. She wanted nothing more than to erase Leonard from her life. But now fate was handing her the power to destroy him completely, and that terrified her. Meanwhile, Cassandra Vale's fury reached a fever pitch. In a suite filled with shattered glass and spilled champagne, she screamed at Leonard. They're worshipping her. Do you see the headlines? Do you see the crowds? She's their martyr, and I'm their villain. Leonard sat slumped, his face ashen. He had stopped trying to calm her days ago. They'll never forget last night, Cassandra raged on. The necklace, the ring, she humiliated me. You humiliated me. And now Julian Cross is parading her like a queen while we sit here drowning. Leonard snapped, his voice raw. Do you think this is about you? I am losing everything. The board wants me gone, investors are pulling out, and now there's a goddamn leak accusing me of fraud. Cassandra froze, her fury colliding with fear. Fraud? Leonard buried his face in his hands. They think Isabella knows. If she speaks, I'm finished. Cassandra's voice turned sharp, almost vicious. Then stop her. Do whatever you have to. She's carrying your child, Leonard. Remind her of that. But Leonard didn't answer. His silence was heavier than words. That night, Isabella stood on her balcony, the city glittering beneath her. Julian joined her, his presence a steady calm. They'll come after me, she murmured. Leonard won't go quietly. Julian's voice was low, unyielding. Then let him come. You've already won the crowd. Now you win the truth. Isabella turned, searching his face. And if the truth drags me down with him? Julian held her gaze. Then I'll fall with you. The words struck her deeper than any promise. For the first time, she realized Julian wasn't just shielding her. He was binding his fate to hers. She touched her stomach, whispering almost to herself. Then tomorrow, it begins. The city was addicted. Every magazine cover, every late-night talk show, every glowing phone screen carried the same question. Whose child is Isabella Hale carrying? The tabloids were merciless. Some swore the baby was Leonard's, pointing to the timing of the separation. Others insisted Julian was the father, dredging up the photos of him lingering in Isabella's past. Headlines screamed, pregnant ex-wife, love child of Cross or Carrington. Julian Cross seen entering Isabella's apartment after midnight. Leonard furious over paternity scandal. For Isabella, every step outside became a battlefield. Reporters shoved microphones in her face, strangers shouted questions in the street, some voices cheered her name, others spat ugly accusations. Through it all, Isabella stayed silent. Her dignity became her armor. But silence, in the frenzy of the media, only sharpened the hunger. In his office, Leonard's rage boiled. He hurled a crystal decanter against the wall, shattering it into shards. She's making me a fool, he roared. The world thinks I don't even know if I fathered my own child. Cassandra lounged on the sofa, her legs crossed, her smile sharp. Well, do you? Leonard's eyes blazed. Of course it's mine. Cassandra raised a brow. Then prove it. Demand a test. Drag her into court. Show them she's nothing without your name. Leonard paced, his chest heaving. If I push too hard, I look desperate. Weak. Julian will spin it. Make me the villain again. Cassandra's smile twisted. You already are the villain, so use it. Villains don't beg, they take. Her words coiled around him like poison, and for the first time, Leonard considered it. Meanwhile, Isabella sat in her living room, curtains drawn against the flash of cameras. Letters of support still poured in, but now they were mixed with cruelty, questions about her virtue, whispers about the child. She pressed her hand against her stomach, whispering, You're not a scandal. You're not a weapon. You're mine. Julian entered, his expression unreadable. He carried a stack of newspapers, headlines blazing with her name. "They won't stop," he said quietly. "They'll circle until someone gives them blood." Isabella looked up, her eyes weary. "And what if that blood is mine?" Julian crossed the room, kneeling before her. For the first time his voice lost its steel. It was raw, human. "Then let it be mine first," her breath caught. "Julian." But he silenced her with a look. "Tomorrow," he said, "I speak. The world wants an answer, and I'll give it." The next evening, cameras flooded the lobby of a luxury hotel where Julian had called a press conference. Reporters buzzed like hornets, their pens and microphones poised for the kill. Leonard watched from his penthouse, his fists clenched. Cassandra at his side whispered, "This is it. He's going to claim her child." And deep inside, Leonard knew, if Julian did, everything was lost. On stage, Julian Cross stood tall, his presence commanding silence before he even spoke. Isabella sat to the side, her hands folded over her stomach, her face calm but pale. Julian began. "The past weeks have been filled with questions. About Isabella. About her child. About me." Flashes erupted. Reporters leaned forward. Julian's gaze swept the crowd, unflinching. "I will tell you the truth. The child Isabella carries may or may not share my blood. That is not what matters." A murmur rippled, confusion spreading. "What matters," Julian continued, "is that the child is hers. And because it is hers, I will protect it with my life. Whether it is mine or not, it is under my name, my shield, my care." The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, flashes blinded the air, but Julian's voice thundered above it all. "Blood does not make a father, love does, and this child will never be without either." Leonard smashed his glass against the floor, his face twisted in fury. "He's stealing my child, my name." Cassandra leaned close, her whisper venomous. "Then take it back. Sue her, demand custody, drag her into the dirt until she begs." Leonard's chest heaved. His empire was collapsing, his reputation shredded, and now even his child, his legacy, was slipping from his grasp. Rage consumed him, hot and blinding. "Yes," he growled, "if Julian wants to claim what's mine, then I'll destroy her before I let it happen." Back at the press conference, Isabella stood slowly, the room still roaring. She looked out at the sea of cameras, the thousands of eyes piercing her. She placed her hand over her stomach. Her voice was soft, but it carried. "This child is not a scandal, not a weapon, not a headline. This child is hope, my hope." The room hushed. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but her voice did not break. "And no matter what the world decides to call me, I will raise this child in truth, not lies, in strength, not fear. That is all anyone needs to know." The applause shook the hall. For once, the questions ceased. The night after Julian's press conference was heavy with silence. The world still echoed with his words. "Blood does not make a father, love does." But inside Isabella's penthouse, the air was thick with unease. She sat curled on the sofa, her hands resting over her stomach, while the city glittered outside like a cruel audience that never stopped watching. She had just begun to drift into sleep when the buzzer rang. Her chest tightened. Few people knew how to reach her directly. Fewer still dared. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Isabella," came the voice she knew too well. "It's me. Open the door." Leonard. Her pulse hammered. She hesitated, then pressed the release. The elevator hummed, carrying her past into her present. When the door opened, Leonard stood there, disheveled in a way she had never seen. His suit wrinkled, his tie askew, his eyes bloodshot. For a moment, he simply stared at her belly. "It's mine," he whispered, as though trying to convince himself. "It has to be." Isabella straightened her shoulders. "That's not why you're here." He stepped inside, his movements jerky, desperate. "I need to talk to you. Alone. No cameras. No Julian." "Say what you came to say," Isabella replied, her voice calm but taut. Leonard's hands shook as he raked them through his hair. "They're tearing me apart. The board, the investors, they all think I've lost control. And now this." He gestured toward her stomach. "They think even my child isn't mine." Isabella's lips tightened. "You did that? Not me." His face twisted. "I loved you, I gave you everything, and you throw it all away? For him?" Her laugh was hollow. "You gave me chains and called it love. You gave me silence and called it everything." Leonard flinched, but his eyes burned hotter. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Don't forget, Isabella, you're still carrying my blood. And if you think you can erase me from this child's life, you're wrong. I'll take custody. I'll drag you through court until you break." Her hand instinctively shielded her stomach. For a moment, fear cut through her composure. "Don't," she whispered. Leonard leaned in, his voice a hiss. "Then say it's mine. Tell the world it's mine and I'll protect you. Deny me and I'll destroy you." The words hung like a knife. For a moment, Isabella saw not the man she once married, but the monster she had survived, the nights of slammed doors, the cutting silences, the loneliness. Her strength faltered, and tears blurred her vision. But before Leonard could press further, a voice thundered from the doorway. "That's enough!" Both turned. Julian stood there, tall, unyielding, his eyes blazing. Leonard straightened, his mask snapping back into place. "Of course, the savior arrives, always in the right place, isn't he?" Julian strode inside, his presence filling the room. "You don't belong here." Leonard sneered. "And you do? Tell me, Julian, how long have you been waiting to steal my wife? How many nights did you watch, circling like a vulture?" Julian's jaw tightened. "I didn't steal her. You threw her away." The words landed like a blow. Isabella stood frozen, torn between the two men, her past and her present colliding like storms. Leonard turned on her, his voice breaking. "Isabella, don't you see? He's using you. He wants your story, your tragedy, your child, to polish his name. But me, I was there first. I was your husband." Her tears finally fell, but her voice was steady. "And what did that mean, Leonard? Being my husband while leaving me alone night after night? Being my husband while parading her in front of the world?" Leonard's face crumbled, desperation leaking through his fury. "I made mistakes, but you were mine. You'll always be mine." Julian stepped between them, his voice low, lethal. "She doesn't belong to anyone." The silence that followed was suffocating. Leonard's chest heaved, his fists trembling. He looked between them, the woman he had lost, the man who had replaced him, and something in his eyes snapped. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "Both of you." He stormed out, the door slamming behind him like a final verdict. The room fell quiet again, but Isabella's body shook. She sank into the sofa, burying her face in her hands. Julian knelt before her, his voice softer now. "You're safe. He can't touch you." But Isabella shook her head. "You don't know him. He'll do anything. He'll drag me through the mud until there's nothing left." Julian took her trembling hands in his. For the first time, he let the mask of control slip. His eyes were raw, vulnerable. "Then let him try. Because I've watched you stand alone long enough. Not anymore. If he comes for you, he comes through me." Her breath hitched. For years, she had stood in silence, bracing storms alone. Now, for the first time, she felt a shield that wasn't her own. She whispered, broken but fierce, "Then I'm not afraid." Julian pressed her hands to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers. Not anymore. The storm finally broke. By Monday morning, every financial network carried the same story: Carrington Empire under investigation for fraud. Anonymous leaks expose offshore accounts, hidden transfers. Board members distanced themselves from Leonard Carrington. For years, Leonard had hidden his crimes behind smoke and mirrors, dazzling the world with glittering parties and billion-dollar deals. But the leaks had torn the curtain wide open. Investors fled. Stock plummeted. Banks froze accounts. And suddenly, the man who once ruled boardrooms with an iron smile was nothing more than prey. In his penthouse, Leonard raged like a trapped beast. Papers lay scattered, glasses shattered, his empire reduced to headlines mocking his name. Cassandra stood near the window, her phone glowing in her manicured hand. She had been silent for hours, watching him unravel. Finally, she spoke. "You're finished, Leonard." He whirled on her, his eyes bloodshot. "Don't you dare." But she only smirked. "The investors are calling me. They want me on the inside. They don't trust you anymore, but they'll listen to me." "You?" he spat. "You're nothing without me." Her laughter was sharp, cruel. "Funny. That's exactly what they used to say about Isabella. And look where she is now." Leonard's chest heaved. "You'd betray me?" Cassandra's gaze hardened. "You betrayed yourself, and I don't plan on sinking with you." She slipped her phone into her purse, her heels clicking against the marble as she walked out. The door shut, and Leonard was alone. Truly alone. The next day, Leonard's humiliation deepened. Photographs of Cassandra surfaced, smiling on the arm of another investor, already whispering deals into his ear. The caption beneath screamed, "Cassandra Vale abandons Carrington amid scandal." Leonard's phone buzzed endlessly with reporters, creditors, lawyers, but he ignored them all. His eyes burned with one thought, one obsession. Isabella. The world had crowned her a heroine. Julian had claimed her child as his own. And now Leonard was being erased. Not just from business, not just from society, but from blood. No, he would not allow it. That evening he stormed into his lawyer's office. The man looked pale, already exhausted from the tidal wave of scandal. "I want custody," Leonard said. His voice was flat, deadly. "File the papers. Now." The lawyer hesitated. "Leonard, with the fraud allegations." "I don't care about allegations. That child is mine, and she—" His jaw tightened. "She will not raise it under his name." The lawyer swallowed hard. "If you go down this road, it will be public. Brutal. Every detail of your marriage, your scandals, your mistress, it will all come out." Leonard leaned across the desk, his eyes wild. "Then let it. I would rather burn the world than let Julian Cross steal my child." News of the lawsuit hit like wildfire. Leonard Carrington files for custody of ex-wife's child. Pregnant ex-wife faces legal battle as fraud scandal mounts. Julian Cross vows to defend Isabella against all attacks. Outside Isabella's apartment, the swarm of cameras doubled. Shouted questions filled the air. "Isabella, will you fight for custody? Is Julian really the father? Will you testify against Leonard?" Inside, Isabella sat trembling, her hands clutching her stomach. The thought of a courtroom, of her child's future being debated under fluorescent lights, sickened her. Julian sat across from her, his jaw set. He's desperate. He knows he's finished. This is his last weapon. Isabella's voice cracked. "And what if it works? What if they take my baby?" Julian leaned forward, his eyes blazing. "Listen to me. He will not win. Not with the truth on our side. Not while I'm standing." Her tears spilled over, but his certainty steadied her. Still the fear gnawed at her. Fear not for herself, but for the fragile life inside her. Meanwhile, Leonard gave his first interview since the scandal broke. He sat before the cameras, his once pristine image now frayed but defiant. "My ex-wife is being manipulated," he declared. "Julian Cross has used her pain to attack me, but the child she carries, make no mistake, that child is mine, and I will not be erased from its life." The anchor pressed. "What about the fraud allegations?" Leonard's jaw tightened. "Lies, fabricated by enemies. This isn't about money. It's about family. It's about a father's right." But even as he spoke, his eyes betrayed him, haunted, desperate, unraveling. Back in her apartment, Isabella watched the interview, her stomach twisting. For years, Leonard had silenced her. For years, he had defined the narrative. But not anymore. She turned to Julian, her voice steady despite the storm. "Then we fight." Julian's hand closed around hers, firm, unyielding. "Then we fight." The stage was set, not just for a battle of wealth and power, but for the soul of a child not yet born. And in that fight, no one would emerge unscarred. The courthouse was a theater of war. Crowds pressed against the barricades outside, reporters jostling for angles, cameras flashing like lightning across a storm. Inside, marble pillars loomed over polished benches, the air thick with tension. This was not just a custody hearing. It was the climax of a saga that had gripped the world. At the front, Leonard Carrington sat rigid, his suit immaculate, his face carved into pride. Yet his hands trembled against the table. He had lost his company, his mistress, his empire. This was all that remained, the child, his last claim to relevance. Beside him, his lawyers shuffled papers, their eyes sharp with desperation. Across the aisle, Isabella sat with Julian beside her. She wore no jewels, no armor but her dignity. Her hand rested on her stomach, her presence calm but resolute. Julian's gaze never left her, his quiet strength wrapping around her like a shield. The judge entered. The gavel struck. Case of Leonard Carrington versus Isabella Hale regarding custody. The room held its breath. Leonard's lawyer rose first, his voice smooth but biting. "Your Honor, my client only seeks what is rightfully his, the chance to raise his child." "Mrs. Hale." "Miss Hale," Isabella corrected, her voice clear. The lawyer faltered. "Miss Hale is a woman entangled with another man, a billionaire whose motives are questionable at best. We intend to prove that Mr. Carrington is the rightful father and that this child deserves to bear his name, not be used as a pawn in Mr. Cross's games." Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Leonard lifted his chin, smug. But then Cassandra Vale was called to the stand. She entered in a crimson dress, every eye turning. Leonard's face hardened. He hadn't expected her appearance. Miss Vale, the opposing lawyer, asked, "You were closely involved with Mr. Carrington during his marriage?" Cassandra's smile was venomous. Closely enough. What was his relationship with his wife? Her gaze flicked to Isabella, then back to Leonard. Neglectful, controlling. He paraded me while she sat at home. He humiliated her in public, dismissed her in private. The truth? Leonard never wanted a wife. He wanted an accessory. Leonard slammed his fist against the table. Lies, but Cassandra only smiled sweetly. Not lies, Leonard. Memories. Gasps rippled. Reporters scribbled furiously. The lawyer continued. "And do you believe Mr. Carrington is fit to raise a child?" Cassandra's voice was silk wrapped around steel. Fit? He couldn't even protect his company. He destroyed everything he touched, including me. And he'll destroy that child too. Leonard's mask cracked. He shouted across the courtroom, his voice raw, desperate. "You betrayed me, Cassandra. You all betray me." The judge slammed the gavel. Order, but the damage was done. Leonard no longer looked like a father fighting for his child. He looked like a man unraveling before the world. Finally, it was Isabella's turn to speak. She rose slowly, her hand never leaving her stomach. The courtroom hushed. Her voice was soft, steady, but every word struck like glass. "I am not here to destroy Leonard. He has done that himself. I am here because I carry a child who deserves peace, who deserves to grow up free of cruelty, free of shame, free of the chains that bound me for years." Her eyes met the judge's. "This is not about money. It is not about revenge. It is about dignity. I will protect my child's dignity with my life, because that is what a parent does." Silence filled the room. Even the reporters lowered their pens, their eyes shining. Julian finally rose, his voice deep, unwavering. "And I will stand with her. This child may or may not share my blood. But blood does not define fatherhood. Love does, and this child will never want for love while I breathe." The judge leaned forward, his expression grave. "I have heard enough." The gavel struck. Custody awarded to Isabella Hale. The courtroom erupted, cheers, gasps, cameras flashing like fire. Isabella closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. She placed both hands over her stomach, whispering to the life within her, "We are free." Julian's hand found hers, strong, steady. For the first time she allowed herself to lean into him, not as a crutch but as a choice. Leonard remained seated, frozen, his face pale as ash. Around him his lawyers whispered of appeals, but he didn't hear. His empire was gone, his mistress gone, his child gone. He had nothing left but the echo of his own pride. Slowly, he lowered his head into his hands, the image of a man broken. Not by enemies, but by himself. Outside, the crowd roared as Isabella emerged, Julian at her side. Reporters shouted questions, but she answered none. Instead, she lifted her head to the flashing lights, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. For the first time in years, she wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was walking into freedom. The story did not end with diamonds or declarations, but with a quiet truth. Dignity cannot be bought, sold, or stolen. Leonard Carrington had lost everything because he believed people were possessions. Isabella Hale had won, not by revenge, but by refusing to be owned. And as she stepped into the future, hand in hand with Julian, her unborn child safe within her, the world understood. Some victories are not shouted. They are lived. So that's how the story ends, my friends. If you're still here with me right now, maybe something in Isabella's journey touched you. Maybe it reminded you of a time you had to stand up for your own dignity. Or maybe it whispered a truth you've always needed to hear. Your worth is not defined by what you've lost, but by what you choose to protect. Like the Stoics once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Isabella's freedom wasn't about winning in court, or even about defeating Leonard. It was about choosing herself, her child, and her future. And now, I want to leave you with this. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs that reminder. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories behind closed doors. Because sometimes freedom isn't loud. It's simply the courage to walk away.